The Rebel Alliance is built on the backs of people who will never be remembered. Not the generals, not the pilots who get medals pinned to their chests, the ones who die in hallways. Today, I'm breaking down every single rank in the Rebel Alliance military, what each one actually means, and what it costs. Starting at the bottom, where the cost is highest. Trooper. Here's the thing about being a rebel trooper. You are, statistically speaking, already dead. You just haven't gotten around to it yet. The trooper is the absolute foundation of the rebel military. Squads of roughly 8 to 12 personnel, filling roles as riflemen, gunners, medics, whatever the mission needs. They execute orders handed down from NCOs and junior officers. Standard military stuff. But here's where it gets complicated. These aren't stormtroopers. Stormtroopers operate inside a machine with millions of reinforcements, standardized equipment, and a command structure so rigid you could set a watch by it. Rebel troopers get none of that. They're outnumbered, cut off from leadership, navigating unfamiliar terrain with incomplete information. The Alliance expects every trooper to think for themselves in ways that would get an Imperial conscript court-martialed. And what do they get for that extra initiative? They get to die first. The fleet troopers on the Tantive 4 exist for one purpose: to show you how lethal stormtroopers are. They hold a hallway, they get shredded. That's the job. On Hoth, troopers man trenches against AT-AT walkers. On Scarif, nearly every ground-deployed trooper is killed in action. Then the Death Star fires anyway, just to make sure. Casualty rates aren't just high, they're catastrophic. And between battles, these troopers have zero say in strategy, while paying the highest physical price in the entire Alliance. But if you think being expendable is bad, wait until you're the one responsible for keeping those expendable people alive. Sergeant. The Sergeant is where the Rebel Alliance stops asking you to die and starts asking you to decide who might. A trooper follows orders, a Sergeant gives them, and then lives with whatever happens next. Non-commissioned officers at this level command squads of 8 to 15 personnel, making real-time calls about positioning, maneuvering under fire, and when to pull back. These aren't decisions made in briefing rooms with holotables and coffee. They're made in the dirt, with blaster bolts overhead and half your squad looking at you like you have answers. You'd better have answers. But combat is only part of it, as sergeants maintain discipline, organize training rotations, enforce security protocols, and act as de facto administrators. In an organization that can't afford bloated support staff, the sergeant becomes the entire middle management layer compressed into one exhausted person. Here's where it gets personal. Sergeant Ruskat Melshi, the Pathfinder leader on Scarif's beaches, is the living embodiment of this rank. He's directing troop movements, coordinating pushes under devastating fire, shouting orders while the world explodes around him, and then Andor reveals the rest of his story. Melshi was an Imperial prison escapee who channels that trauma directly into NCO leadership. He bridges the gap between what High Command wants and what enlisted soldiers can actually do. And that gap is where the Alliance wins. The Empire enforces rigid obedience from the top down. Rebel sergeants are trusted to interpret, adapt, and improvise. When a plan falls apart, and plans always fall apart, it's a sergeant making the call that saves or kills everyone around them. That weight never leaves. Experienced NCOs are irreplaceable, so they just keep going. Mission after mission, decision after decision, bearing the psychological burden of every call that sent someone home in a bag. But at least a sergeant only answers for a dozen lives. Wait until you meet the rank that multiplies that number by 4. Lieutenant. Here's the thing about being a lieutenant in the Rebel Alliance. You're senior enough to get blamed when things go wrong, but junior enough to still be standing in the exact spot where blaster bolts land. It's the stuck in the middle rank, and almost nobody talks about it. A lieutenant commands somewhere between 20 and 40 ground troops, essentially a platoon broken into squads each run by sergeants. In starfighter operations, they lead small flights of 3 to 4 ships, answering to a commander above them. Their job is to take higher-level orders and translate them into something that actually works on the ground. Detailed movement plans, engagement sequences, logistics coordination, all while Imperial electronic jamming turns every transmission into a coin flip. Many of these officers are freshly promoted from NCO roles. Yesterday, you were a sergeant sharing rations with your squad. Today, you're expected to send those same people into positions where some of them won't come back. That transition requires a kind of emotional recalibration that no field manual covers. But here's where it gets complicated. The lieutenant rank functions as a career bottleneck. There are only so many captain slots available, and the rebellion isn't running a meritocratic promotion board. Some lieutenants stagnate for months waiting for a post that never opens. Others get catapulted to captain overnight because the previous one caught a turbo laser bolt on Sullust. Neither outcome is great. Canon is weirdly quiet about lieutenants. Most identified ones appear in supplementary guides as element leaders or adjutants shuffling datapads. The films jump from scrappy troopers directly to captains and commanders making the big calls, leaving lieutenants in a narrative blind spot, which is, kind of fitting. Even the storytellers forgot they existed. If you think being stuck in the middle sounds rough, wait until you hear about the rank directly above, where the real weight of independent command starts landing on your shoulders. Captain. Here's where the rebellion stops asking you to be brave and starts asking you to be morally flexible. A captain commands anywhere from 80 to 150 troops, a Corvette-class starship, or a critical Alliance intelligence cell. But the real weight of this rank isn't the headcount, it's the autonomy. Captains don't get micromanaged. They get a broad directive and a pat on the back, and then they're expected to figure out the rest on their own, including the parts nobody wants to talk about at the briefing table. Cassian Andor is the definitive example. As a captain in Alliance intelligence, Andor leads covert missions, evaluates informants, and makes kill or spare decisions in real time with zero oversight. He's not a soldier in the traditional sense. He's a hybrid, part operative, part assassin, part field analyst, functioning in morally gray zones that would make most lieutenants hand in their resignation. The rebellion needs people like him precisely because the cause requires things that the cause technically stands against. Assassination, manipulation, sacrificing assets who trusted you. That's the captain's job description, written in invisible ink, and then there's Scarif. Andor orchestrates an entirely unsanctioned infiltration of one of the most heavily defended Imperial installations in the galaxy. No approval from high command. A few dozen volunteers at best. They do it anyway, and nearly every single one of them dies on that beach or in that tower. The mission succeeds. The people don't come home. That's the captain rank distilled into its purest form. You get handed impossible operations, you execute them with whatever you've got, and if you're captured, you become the Empire's favorite interrogation subject because, names, safe houses, cell structures, everything. Captains are subject to strict compartmentalization protocols for exactly this reason. And in the worst case scenario, there are last resort measures in place, which is a polite way of saying the rebellion would rather you die than talk. But if you think captains carry a heavy burden, wait until you hear what commanders are expected to juggle, because at that rank, the stakes stop being personal and start being organizational. Commander. This is the rank where Star Wars gets personal. Commander is the most glamorous title you can hold in the Rebel Alliance, and the most lethal one to keep. It's where you stop being a cog in the machine and start being the person the Empire specifically wants dead. A commander runs starfighter squadrons of roughly 12 fighters, medium warships, or composite battle groups that integrate multiple tactical elements at the operational level. You're not just flying anymore. You're allocating pilots to missions, planning attack runs, and making decisions that determine whether people come home. Luke Skywalker holds this rank at Hoth, leading Rogue Squadron's defense against the AT-AT walkers bearing down on Echo Base. He's not just another pilot in the formation, he's choosing who flies where, coordinating the tow cable strategy, and buying evacuation time for every transport lifting off behind him. When his speeder gets disabled by walker fire, the entire defensive operation loses its nerve center. That's the problem with being commander. You're both the plan and the target. Hera Syndulla shows the other side of the coin. She's not just flying the Ghost anymore. She's coordinating entire squadrons and task forces, orchestrating attacks on Imperial installations, planning evacuations of allied worlds. Her command style blends formal military structure with the trust of a close crew, which is probably why she survives long enough to make general. Most don't. Commander Jun Sato proves that point. He leads Phoenix Squadron's proto-fleet, managing carriers and frigates, making impossible calls about when to engage and when to run. His final act is ramming his flagship into an Imperial interdictor to break the blockade and give his people an escape route. That's the ceiling of what this rank demands, not just your skill, your life. Here's the thing about Commander that nobody talks about. Imperial pilots are trained to identify and target squadron leaders specifically. Kill the commander, and the formation falls apart. The attrition rate for Rebel starfighter pilots is already brutal given the intensity of these engagements, but for the person at the front of the formation with the biggest target on their canopy, it's worse. Much worse. But if Commander sounds dangerous, wait until you hear about the rank that somehow gets even less glory for even more responsibility. Major. There's a particular kind of dread that comes with being the person who watches the board, not the person pulling the trigger, not the person running, the person standing in the command post, staring at blinking lights that represent human lives, knowing that some of those lights are about to go dark and that you're the one who decides which ones. That's a major in the Rebel Alliance. Majors command battalion-scale formations, anywhere from 300 to 600 personnel, or they oversee critical base-level functions like security, ground defense coordination, and evacuation planning. They operate from command posts where multiple information streams converge simultaneously: sensor data, patrol reports, supply inventories, casualty figures. Their job is to synthesize all of it, allocate reserves where they're needed most, and coordinate with air or orbital support when it's available, which in the Rebellion's case is not often enough. Major Bren Durlin at Echo Base is the clearest picture we get of this rank in action. He's the one advising Leia and Han on whether they can keep the base doors open during Hoth's lethal nights while Luke is still missing. He's coordinating search and rescue efforts. He's managing ground defense for an entire installation that he knows will eventually be found. Every patrol schedule, every sensor placement, every evacuation drill, that's Durlin's world. And here's where it gets quietly awful. When that day finally comes, majors are often among the last to leave. They stay behind to oversee rearguard actions. Watching defenses they spent months constructing collapse in real time. Every trooper who doesn't make it to a transport is a failure they feel personally. You rarely fire a weapon. You rarely face direct enemy contact. But when an operation fails, the guilt is suffocating. You should have anticipated the flanking route. You should have allocated that extra squad to the eastern perimeter. The fact that no one could have seen it coming doesn't make it feel any different at 3 a.m. when you're staring at the casualty list. Majors don't get songs written about them. But when a base evacuates successfully, when 400 people make it onto transports instead of 200, that's a major's work. Invisible, unglamorous, and absolutely essential. But if majors are the ones holding individual bases together, colonels are the ones connecting those bases into something that actually resembles a war effort. Colonel. Here's the thing about colonels in the Rebel Alliance. They're not the generals standing in front of holographic maps during big briefings. They're not the admirals commanding fleets from the bridge. Colonels are the people nobody outside the top brass even knows exist. And that's entirely by design, because at this level, visibility gets you killed. A colonel commands regiment-sized formations, somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000 personnel spread across multiple systems. But the ones who really matter, they don't command troops at all. They command secrets. Colonel Aaron Kraken ran Alliance intelligence, not a division of it, the whole thing. Every spy embedded in an Imperial garrison, every analyst decrypting coded transmissions, every saboteur rigging a fuel depot to blow. All of it filtered through one man's desk. Without people like Kraken running asset networks across Imperial space, High Command is making decisions blind. No verified targets, no advance warning of fleet movements, just guesswork and hope. But here's where it gets dark. Intelligence colonels approve missions where extraction isn't even on the table. They calculate the value of information against the near certainty of an operative's death and sign off. That's Tuesday for them. Hey Dimitri, need you to infiltrate the garrison on Lothal. No, there's no exit plan. Good luck though. And the terrifying flip side is what happens if a colonel gets captured. A sergeant knows their squad. A captain knows their cell. A colonel like Kraken knows the entire operational structure, agent identities, long-term strategic objectives. One successful interrogation could unravel decades of network building across hundreds of systems, which is why colonels live under constant relocation orders and operate on compartmentalized knowledge systems where even they don't have the full picture. Colonels are simultaneously the most indispensable and the most dangerous people in the Alliance. They know too much to lose, and too much to let live if compromised. Shadow generals with no public face, wielding power that most of the rebellion's own soldiers will never know exists. But if colonels operate in the dark, the rank above them steps fully into the light, and the expectations that come with that visibility are crushing. General. Every general in the Rebel Alliance has one thing in common. Their signature operation was one miscalculation away from ending the rebellion entirely. Not damaging it, not setting it back, ending it. General Dodonna stands in front of a room full of pilots at Yavin and tells them to fly down a trench and hit a 2-meter exhaust port. That's the plan. He's committing nearly the entire starfighter force to a single desperate gamble because the alternative is extinction. If those pilots miss, if the Force isn't with Luke Skywalker that day, the Death Star fires again and the Alliance ceases to exist. Dodonna knows this. He briefs it anyway. General Riekin faces a different kind of pressure at Hoth. He's not planning an attack, he's managing a collapse. The moment Imperial probes confirm their location, Riekin's job becomes triage. Which transports launch first, which personnel personnel get priority, which units stay behind as rear guard, knowing full well they're buying time with their lives. He can't hold Echo Base. He never could. His only victory condition is making sure enough of the rebellion survives to fight another day. Then there's General Medine, a former Imperial defector who plans the Endor commando operation. He designs a ground assault on a shield generator protected by an entire legion of the Emperor's best troops, on a moon none of them have set foot on, with a team small enough to fit in a stolen shuttle. If that generator stands, the fleet is annihilated between the Death Star's superlaser and the Imperial Armada. No pressure, and then you've got Han Solo and Lando Calrissian, who receive battlefield promotions to general specifically for Endor. Han leads the ground team, Lando leads the entire space assault, two guys who were smugglers and gamblers a few years earlier, now holding the fate of the galaxy in their hands. Whether those promotions represent genuine rank or a political signal to the troops is a question worth asking. But here's the thing, it didn't matter, they delivered. That's what separates a general from every rank below. Commanders lose squadrons, generals lose wars, but if you think generals carry the heaviest burden in the alliance, wait until you meet the officers who command everything that flies. Admiral. Every rank below this one exists to feed upward into a single moment, where one person's call decides whether the rebellion lives or dies. That's not hyperbole, that's the job description. An admiral commands multi-ship task forces of capital ships, escorts, and starfighter wings across multiple star systems. They take an eclectic fleet of Mon Calamari cruisers, repurposed civilian freighters, and whatever else the Alliance managed to beg, borrow, or steal, and they forge it into something that can trade blows with the Imperial Navy, which is, not ideal starting conditions for the person responsible for the survival of galactic democracy. Here's the thing about rebel admirals that separates them from every other rank. If a sergeant makes a bad call, a squad dies. If a general miscalculates, a base falls. If an admiral gets it wrong in a major fleet engagement, the Alliance's entire naval capability ceases to exist. The rebellion ends as a conventional fighting force that afternoon, and the Alliance kept gambling everything on single engagements against superweapons. At Scarif, Admiral Raddus commits his fleet to support an unsanctioned ground assault based on unclear intelligence. Nobody ordered him to go, he just went. When the planetary shield gate blocks the Death Star plan's transmission, Raddus uses a disabled Star Destroyer as a battering ram. Shoving it into the gate, he sacrifices his flagship, his fleet, and his own life to secure a data transmission that nobody in High Command even approved. That's not recklessness, that's a man who understood that if the moment passes, it never comes back. Then there's Ackbar at Endor. He commands the entire Alliance fleet into what turns out to be the Emperor's trap. The Death Star is operational. The Imperial fleet has them boxed in. Instead of panicking, Ackbar orders his ships to close range with the Star Destroyers so the super laser can't fire without hitting its own forces. He holds the fleet together through sheer tactical creativity until the shield generator falls. Raddus was aggression incarnate. Ackbar was adaptation under pressure. Two completely different forms of genius, both operating under conditions where a single wrong read means the galaxy stays under Imperial rule forever. Every trooper who held a trench, every sergeant who kept a squad together, every captain who ran a covert op, every commander who led a squadron, every general who planned a campaign, all of it funneled into moments where one admiral's decision determined whether any of it mattered. That's the weight of the rank, not just lives. The entire war, balanced on a single afternoon. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.